Tata are taking another crack at the hotly contested hatchback segment. And after the lukewarm response to the Bolt, the Zica has a lot riding on it. But unlike the Bolt, that was basically a revamped Vista, the Zica is practically all new, whether we talk about the fresh looks, the cabin, or those two all-new engines. Well, let's get down to it and see if the Zica has got what it takes. The Zica is a nice-looking car, and I say nice because it's not edgy and sharp, but more a pleasing design that would last over time. The front has cuts, character lines, creases and curves that all draw you to the T logo in the center. This sits atop a grille of hexagonal cutouts in glossy black plastic. The nose is divided into two clear halves with a smiling upturned grille at the top, and below the body color bumper, the air dam that also has the glossy black hexagons. The side profile of the car looks neatly proportioned, and it carries two distinct shadow lines, one at the bottom of the doors that curls up towards the rear edges and one at the waistline that slants downward towards the front, giving it a bit of sportiness. With 170 millimeters of ground clearance, the Zica is higher than its competitors. But it doesn't look quite like that. It sits quite squat to the ground. That feeling is partially due to the rear, where the bezel tail lamps stretch out around the sides, giving it a wider gate. The rear spoiler on the top has glossy black edges, adding some style. Dimension-wise, the Zica outdoes its competitors, promising a lot of space on the inside. Overall, it's a modern-looking hatch that's definitely pleasing to the eye. Well, the interior of the Tata Zica is definitely impressive. I think it's one of the best we've seen in a Tata car so far. Lots of nice touches over here, like the highlight of the exterior color around the air vent, the honeycomb textured plastic on the dash, the knitted roofline, or this well-damped button for the glove box instead of the crude handles that we're used to seeing on cars of this class. The center console interesting and has, of course, the info display. Apparently, it's a practical car too because it has 22 storage spaces. Well, there aren't 22 different locations, but if you count the spaces like the two bottle holders in the front doors and the flat pocket, it all adds up. There are a lot of cubby holes and storage areas in the dash and central console as well. There are nifty little touches like a hook that neatly folds flush into the side of the front passenger footwell to keep bags in place. Noticeably, pockets on the back of the rear seat are missing, but you do get space in the doors. If there's one thing to complain about, it is that the backrest of the front seat seems a little overplumped and takes a few adjustments to get settled in. But with height adjust for the driver's seat and the steering, it's easy to settle in. And of course, it comes loaded with tech too. There is a Connect Next infotainment system developed by Harman, which comes with an 8-speaker audio system. And apart from the regular aux-in and USB, the infotainment system comes with the Turn-by-Turn app, which allows you to use Map My India maps via your phone, and the Duke app, which uses the mobile hotspot on your phone to create a virtual network in the car to host a service for sharing songs on the device. You can connect up to 10 devices, which can share the playlist. There's also the multi-info display in the center of the instrument panel. On the safety side, you get driver and front passenger airbags, ABS with EBD, but it remains to be seen whether this will be offered across all variants. The boot is a large 242 litres and it's quite deep. Now, let's get to the opposite end of the car where there are two new engines. We begin with the Petrol, a 3-cylinder 1.2-litre 84 bhp engine with 11.6 kgm of torque. Now, the figures aren't too bad on paper, but the Zica is a heavy car. The Petrol weighs in at 1,012 kg and you can feel that weight out on the road. In the Petrol engine, initial power delivery is good, but then as you get deeper, you find that the mid-range is really flat. In fact, the power delivery itself is very linear, and that's until you get right up at the top end. Just as you're getting to the red line, it feels like it gets its last wind and suddenly pulls a little better again. There's a lot of weight for the engine to lug around, and under load on a slope, that lack of power is accentuated. The car judders trying to get a move on after you slow down, even after dropping gears. The clutch, though light and easy, also doesn't really release progressively, making it a little jerky in traffic conditions. If you are pottering around in city traffic, you will find this engine adequate for your daily grind. But get onto an open stretch or try and get an urgent move on and you will find progress feels laboured. The Zica also comes with two modes, City and Eco. Switching it to Eco only blunts the performance even further. On the refinement front, you do hear the thrum of a 3-cylinder, but it's comparable to any other in its class. Now, where the Zica does shine through is in the way the ride and handling is delivered. Steering feels quite accurate around the corners. The tyres grip well, and even as you go around corners, the Zica displays good body control and is happy to change directions quickly and deftly. Drive it out on a highway and you will notice that it feels planted and you can settle into a cruise with confidence. It feels like a larger car when you drive it. Whether you're at the wheel or in the back seat, the Zica does offer a bigger car feel. The back seat feels quite nice and open and airy with lots of glass area. And space-wise, it's pretty good too. I've got Nikhil, who's 5'11", sitting in his driving position. I'm about 5'4", and as you can see, I still have good enough legroom over here. The front seat's nice and high, so you can sort of tuck your feet underneath it and get comfortable too. And the bench as well is wide enough for 3. The seats themselves are comfortable but lack under-thigh support. But you sit nice and high, so visibility is good as well. Now, whilst we are talking about comfort, it must be mentioned that the AC is really not as efficient as it should be. The blower makes a lot of noise on the highest speed, but it doesn't really send out that much air. But let's continue with the other aspects of comfort. Ride quality is actually quite nice for a small car. In the petrol version that I'm in just now, at low speeds, it's rounding off the bumps and potholes quite nicely. And it's quite flat and composed, so even at higher speeds, you find that you don't bob around too much. But there is a difference between the petrol and the diesel. The setup in the diesel does seem firmer. The ride feels a little stiffer and has a harder edge to it than in the petrol car. Still, it's not to the point where you're uncomfortable. In fact, the firmness makes it overall better, offering up a more composed feel. It's not as settled as the Bolt, but it's definitely best in its class. Now let's talk about the diesel engine. This is a 1.05 litre producing 69 bhp and 14.3 kgm of torque. The diesel weighs in heavier at 1080 kgs, but the extra torque does help it feel a little lighter. Power in the diesel engine comes in after the 1500 RPM mark, and then after that it's really nice all the way to the red line, which is around the 4600 RPM mark. It pulls cleanly, it's nice to drive. It's only when you drop below the 1500 RPM mark and you want to get an urgent move on, you'll find you need to work the gears. It's not punchy, but it definitely feels the better of the two engines. Driving it is easier, and although the jerkiness of the clutch is still there, it's not as prominent. Use the gears well, short shift without stretching into the red line, and you'll find the diesel engine is actually quite pleasant. It does the job of city or highway quite well. Push it hard though, and you will hear it. Well, in the diesel, whilst vibration is well controlled for a 3-cylinder, you can hear the sound. It's not so much a diesel clatter, but more a roar, and especially when you push the engine hard. Well, everybody wants to know how fuel efficient this car is, and we can expect the petrol to give around 23.5 kilometers per litre. And you can expect more than that from the diesel.
Well, Tata have put their heart and soul into this Zica, and it definitely shows. Whether we talk about the fresh, exciting looks, whether we talk about the interior cabin and its quality, which is the best we've seen from Tata yet and right up there in the segment. Or then the ride handling compromise, which is an area where the Zica definitely excels. The ride quality is nice, and when you're driving the car, it just doesn't feel like a small car from behind the wheel. It feels like a much larger car. There's a lot else that's going for the Zica too, like space and practicality. It comes loaded with features, especially to attract the younger generation. And of course, there are the two engines, which may not be exciting, but they definitely do the job. Now, at an expected price of sub 4 lakhs, I think this is the car that will deliver on that promise that the earlier Indica gave, more car per car. And I think it is the car to get Tata back in the game.